I am a gangster. In order to sleep with my handsome brother-in-law whose wife ran away, I played the role of an honest mechanic in front of him for 6 years. Kiss her brother-in-law during the day and secretly kiss him at night. Later, I couldn't help myself and tied my brother-in-law to the bed. Has Alexander ever tried a man? I have tried. The phone on the desk kept vibrating. I held the clothes in my mouth, raised my head, let out a sigh, leaned over and kissed Alexander on the face, and picked up the phone. The caller ID shows Jessica. Jessica is my sister, and she just returned to SIPG recently. Alexander came back late today because he went to see her. I answered the phone, wiped the dirt off Alexander's legs with my pants, and said hoarsely, "Hello. Alexander." "It's not Alexander. It's me, Harris. Please put Alexander on the phone." Alexander's breathing was steady, his nostrils flared, as usual, unconscious and unaware. The medicine is imported and very effective. I fell into a deep sleep after drinking it. No matter what you do, he won't wake up. I stared at the thin red marks on his chest, swallowed a mouthful of ice water, and said, "He's asleep. You can tell me if you have anything to say." "Forget it, I'll fight again tomorrow." "Sister, why are you coming back after you've already left?" I clenched my phone, knocked my cup on the coffee table, and reminded Jessica, "Don't look for him anymore, you left him to me." Alexander likes my sister. My sister likes women. 8 years ago, my sister had a fake marriage with Alexander in order to deal with my mother. Alexander had just graduated when he married my sister. He used his only 9,000 yuan to buy a diamond ring. The diamond ring was only worn on my sister's hand for 1 day and was later taken out by Alexander from the bathroom floor drain. The diamond ring is like Alexander's heart. My sister can just throw it away if she wants. After my mother died, my sister wanted to leave SIPG with her lover. I asked her, "What will happen to Alexander if you leave?" My sister glanced at me and said with a smile, "Don't you still have him? Take good care of him for me." "I'll take care." I lowered my head to look at Alexander lying on the sofa. His blush had not yet faded, and his fair skin still had a hint of translucent water. My throat itched, my canine teeth bit the tip of my tongue, and I hummed a laugh. Every aspect has been taken care of, nothing is missed. "Did you answer my call last night?" In the morning, Alexander came out of the bathroom, flipping through his phone and holding a toothbrush in his mouth. "Yeah, Jessica called." His shirt was unbuttoned and the collar was open, revealing the outline of his chest muscles, and looking down, one could see the red marks that had not yet faded. "I sucked it out last night. The taste is very good." Alexander frowned and asked, "What did you say?" I grabbed his collar and buttoned his shirt from bottom to top, until I reached his chest and poked at the red mark. "What's wrong with you? Are you bitten by a bug?" Alexander glanced at it and didn't care. "Maybe. It looks like someone kissed him." I buttoned his shirt to the top, gently pinched his neck, and deliberately said, "Alexander, you came back so late yesterday. Did you sleep with someone else outside?" Alexander glanced at me and said, "Yeah, I'm asleep." He broke away from my hand, put down his phone and rinsed his mouth. He turned around and saw me standing at the bathroom door. He put on his glasses, straightened his cuffs, and asked politely, "What?" Waiting to hear the details. Squinting his eyes and smiling, he talked nonsense. 185 centimeters tall, long legs, 36D thin waist. I held my stomach and laughed so hard that I wanted to die. It sounds like the truth. I really want to tell him that I kissed him. I kissed him all over his body. Alexander pushed me away and walked out. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, straightening my chest and shoulders. TSK, 36D, it's the same no matter how much you practice. After breakfast, Alexander took me to the auto repair shop and drove to work. Watching the back of Alexander's car disappear at the corner of the street, I turned and headed straight for the nightclub. Someone was selling drugs in my place last night. More, a thug from our gang caught the guy, locked him up on the top floor and waited for me all night. I interrogated them for an hour and got a name out of the 2 henchmen. Nathan, the son of gangster boss Hall. It is a rule passed down by the underworld not to touch drugs. After Hall took office, He coveted the profits from drugs and broke the rule. He once wanted to drag me into it, but I refused. I stuck the knife in front of Hall. You can get anything into Xiqing district, but not drugs. I can't control Nathan if he wants to sell it, but he has to sell it in my place, so come and clean your neck. Nathan and Hall obviously didn't take my words seriously. After crippling the two drug dealers' hands, he wiped the blood off his hands and went downstairs, instructing Moore, find out where Nathan's drugs are and bury them both. Moore hesitated. Harris, do we really want to fight them? People are dancing on my head, and you want me to pretend I didn't see it? Today Nathan can sell drugs in my place, and tomorrow Hall can stuff drugs into my mouth. I sell drugs here and they pocket the money. Am I a fucking bodhisattva? I turned the corner and caught a glimpse of Alexander at the bar. He walked towards me and I fell silent instantly. My mind went blank and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I played the role of an honest mechanic in front of Alexander for 6 years. I don't dare bring anything bloody home. First, I don't want Alexander to know too much. Those who are in the underworld are always in danger of losing their jobs. My life is worthless, so if I die, I die. Alexander is different, Alexander is expensive. Second, I swore to Alexander 8 years ago that I would not hold a knife, fight, or do bad things, and that I would be well behaved and supported by him for the rest of my life. I lied to Alexander because I was afraid he wouldn't stay with me forever. After Alexander got married, Jessica rarely came home. Jessica doesn't care about me or Alexander. I dropped out of school at 16. When I was 17, Alexander took me in, went to all the middle schools in the city, compared them several times, and had a few drinks with others, and sent me to a school with strong faculty and good school spirit. On the day it happened, Alexander passed out drunk on the sofa, hugged me and rubbed me, put his chin on my head, and said, "We Harris have started school. Don't be afraid, I will support you, and you will get better and better." I opened my mouth but didn't tell him that I didn't want to go to school. I drank milk obediently, grew taller obediently, and went to school obediently. Then, in a corner where Alexander couldn't see him, he picked up a long knife and started fighting with others. Alexander found injuries on my body and later caught me at the entrance of the alley, covered in blood after a fight with someone. Under Alexander's scrutinizing gaze, half of my body went numb. As clean as Alexander is in the sun, I am as dirty in the shadow. I stiffened my neck, pulled myself together, and erected all the thorns on my body. Said, "See? I am not what you think. I am not obedient at all. I didn't want to go to school, but you forced me to go. If you find it troublesome and don't want me anymore, I'll leave." Alexander moved. He came over, squatted down, and wiped the blood off my face with the sleeve of his white shirt. "If you don't want to go to school, then don't go. Even if you grow up to be nothing, I can't afford to support you. I won't abandon you. I took you in and plan to support you for the rest of your life." He took my hand and gently but forcefully took my knife away. "But Harris, I want you to swear that you will never pick up a knife again, never fight again, never get hurt again, never put your life on the line, and be obedient and be supported by me." I swear. Alexander believes it. He is a little silly. Alexander is different from me. The greatest suffering he has ever experienced in his life is probably being cheated on by my sister. Before I was 15, I had already experienced all the hardships I could endure. I struggled out of the quagmire. I was completely black and couldn't be bleached white, even if I swore an oath. Sometimes, I thought, if Alexander had taken me out 2 years earlier, maybe I would have really been a good child. As he wished, he went to school well and became better and better. But it didn't work. From the time I was 16 and picked up a steel pipe to beat my father to a cripple, and from the time I followed Hall into the underworld, my world was no longer the same. In AG, if someone picked up a knife or joined a gang, they could only climb up. Either be the boss or die. There is no possibility of leaving halfway. Moore said, "Harris, I think I saw our brother-in-law." "Thanks, I'm not blind." Alexander seemed to be looking for someone. His scattered gaze suddenly fell on me. He frowned and narrowed his eyes. I quickly took off Moore's hat, put it on my head, and pushed down the brim. I just got covered in blood upstairs. The smell of blood on his body almost overwhelmed the mixed smell of the nightclub and rushed straight into his nose. Alexander must not see this. Otherwise, there would be no fun. When Alexander passed by me, I leaned aside and lit a cigarette, and the smoke blurred our vision. For a moment, I saw Alexander reaching out his hand to me. My heart was pounding and my pupils constricted. I hoped he wouldn't recognize me, but I also hoped he could see through the smoke and grab me. Alexander! The connection was interrupted at that moment. Alexander put down his hand and looked in the direction of the voice. When he saw the person who called him, his eyes lit up and a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. I saw that smile 1,000 times, 10,000 times 8 years ago. A smile that is unique to Jessica. Alexander brushed past me and walked towards Jessica. As long as Jessica stands there, Alexander is no longer my Alexander. I clenched the burning cigarette in my palm, turned around and looked at them openly. At this moment, there is no need to worry about Alexander recognizing me. As soon as Jessica appeared, Alexander could no longer see anyone else. On the other end, Alexander leaned sideways, bent slightly, and listened to Jessica quietly and attentively. I will have to wait until the next life for Alexander to come back. But people like me will go to hell after death, and may not even have an afterlife. So, what is the saying? Some flowers need to be plucked. I pointed at Alexander's back and told Moore, "You stay here and watch him. If he doesn't leave in 10 minutes, tie him up and send him to Xinghe. He turned around and walked a few steps, then turned back and said to Moore, "Be careful not to hurt him." I leaned against the car and called Alexander, but he didn't answer during the first session. The second one finally connected, and I lazily said, "Alexander, why aren't you home?" "I'm starving." "It was very noisy over there. I have something to do, you eat outside." "Alexander, my stomach hurts. Can you come back early?" "Yeah." "I'll hang up now." I looked down at the black screen for a long time, then put the phone in my pocket. I waited at the entrance of the nightclub for 10 minutes, but Alexander didn't come out. I told him I had a stomachache, but he didn't come back. I knew I couldn't compare to Jessica, but I didn't expect it to be so different. I'm going crazy with jealousy. Alexander arrived at Xinghe before me. Moore was standing guard at the door. I took off my gloves and handed them to Moore, asking, "Is he injured?" "No, I was very careful. I put some drugs in the wine, not much, but it can make me sleep for 2 hours." I pushed the door open and locked Moore out. "Guard it well." Alexander was placed on the bed in the bedroom, his hands folded on his abdomen, sleeping in a good posture. The smell on him is not pleasant, too mixed, I don't like it. At home, we share a bottle of shower gel. The smell of him is the smell of me. When I held him, I felt like he was mine. I just wishfully thought so, but Alexander didn't realize it. I found a hemp rope and tied his hands and feet. He pulled the tie, covered his eyes with it, and tied a knot. Then he sat on the sofa opposite the bed and lit a cigarette. To be honest, it's quite boring to have to wait for him to fall asleep every time. In fact, I have imagined countless times his shocked and ashamed expression when he wakes up in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, the drug was too effective and he never woke up once. When I lit the third cigarette, the person on the bed moved. Alexander groaned, struggled, and asked nervously and vigilantly in the darkness, "Who?" I put the cigarette into the ashtray, walked to the bed, pinched his face and kissed him. The tip of my tongue hurt, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. Put a drop of blood on Alexander's lips and let him go. Looking down at his rapidly rising and falling chest and his irregular breathing. Even so, Alexander remained calm. "Who are you? What do you want? What do you want?" I reached out and rubbed his lips, my fingertips sliding down his Adam's apple, to his heart, to his lower abdomen. The panting became heavier. I lowered my voice and sneered, "Can you be aroused by a man's kiss?" She tapped his belt buckle with her fingers. "Has Alexander ever tried a man?" "Alexander, I have tried." He sighed. "I didn't try it later." I raised my eyebrows and followed his words and asked, "Why?" "I'm sick." I rubbed my face and felt like laughing. "Nonsense." Alexander moved his neck and tilted his head towards me. I just bit you and made you bleed. It's still not too late to buy blocking drugs now. I climbed onto the bed, knelt over him, and took off my shirt. It doesn't matter. If I get infected, I'll die with you. Alexander, you are raping me. I took out a cigarette and put it in my mouth and said vaguely, no, I'm not going to have sex with you. The mist rose and I looked down at Alexander. I know he doesn't like men. Actually, I don't like men either, I just like Alexander. So, I don't care about up or down. Only cares about possession. I just want to possess him, not to insult him. I think very clearly. The process of getting a person is so damn painful. You have to tear yourself apart and reassemble yourself. Fortunately, I am not afraid of pain. He took the last puff of his cigarette and gritted his teeth to endure the severe pain. He took the cigarette but pinched Alexander's face and kissed him. Alexander, come on, kill me. I heard Alexander swear. He rarely swears, but he said 3 times today. When he felt blood on his hands, he froze and cursed, "Don't King move." When I asked him to kill me, I gnashed my teeth and said, "Mad dog." When he heard me laughing, he bit my neck and cursed, "Fuck, you are sick." 7. Early in the morning, Moore knocked on the door and said that Hall invited me to King Shanyuan for breakfast. I just dealt with my son and I can't sit still anymore. I took the gun, put it on my back, looked back at Alexander who was sleeping soundly, and said, "Send him back." When the car arrived at King Shanyuan, I received a message from Moore, "Harris, the person has been sent back." After half an hour of eating breakfast, Hall put down his chopsticks. "Harris, how many years have you been with me?" I put down my chopsticks and said, 10 years I guess. Hall sighed, "It wasn't easy. We could only hang out on the streets of East City back then. I still remember that you were the youngest at that time, but you were very brave and ruthless in everything you did. On the other hand, Nathan is not as good as you. Nathan is younger than you, and you have grown your business and you also take care of your younger brother. Hall thinks too highly of me. Nathan's business is too big and I am too small to take care of it." Hall stared at me with his cloudy eyes. "Harris, you have to know the times." "So what if I don't know him? Do you still think I'm the kid he stepped on 8 years ago? Nathan, even though I'm a jerk, I don't make all the money. Some money can be earned but not spent." Hall didn't say anything. The butler came over and whispered a few words into Hall's ear. "Okay, let's not talk about this." Hall suddenly smiled, waved his hand, and stood up. "There is a professor in Nanyang University who is good at lecturing on Buddhist scriptures. He just happened to be here. Would you like to listen with me?" I followed Hall through the restaurant. "No need for that. I'm not psychic and can't understand Buddhist scriptures." His eyes swept across the tall figure in the living room, and his voice stopped abruptly. A current of electricity struck him straight down, and he lost all his 5 senses and had ringing in his ears. "That person is Alexander." Hall looked at me with a smile. "What's the matter? Do you know each other?" I shook my head, suppressed my sudden anger, looked at Alexander with a strange gaze, and said nonchalantly, "I don't know her, she's pretty. I want to kill Hall." Alexander adjusted his glasses, looked over me, and nodded to Hall calmly, "Boss Chen." Hall's baby daughter Victoria happened to come down from upstairs and shouted happily, "Harris." He ran down and hugged my arm. "Why are you here?" "It just so happens that I want to draw a human figure today, and you can be my model." Alexander's eyes flickered to my arm. Normally, I would not agree to Victoria, but today Hall's knife is hanging over my head. I have soft spots and so does Hall. I reached out and touched Victoria's hair. It was good hair and could be sold for a high price. "Okay." Victoria pulled me upstairs. I smiled and shrugged at Hall. "Nathan, it seems I won't be able to listen to the Buddhist scriptures. I'm young and energetic, and I don't have a connection with Buddhism." In close combat, I demonstrated clearly. If Hall dares to touch Alexander today, I will kill Victoria. When I went upstairs, I glanced down and met Alexander's eyes. The dark gaze fell on me through the lenses, calm and cold. The studio is on the 3rd floor. Victoria came in and took off my clothes. I opened my arms and let her take off my shirt, All I could think about was the way Alexander looked at me when we went upstairs. Are you angry? Why are you angry? Do you know my identity? Do you know that I was the one who kidnapped him last night? Do you know that I secretly kiss him every night? Delicate hands pressed against my abdomen and found the waistband of my pants. I held Victoria down, tilted my head and smiled. Miss, please leave me some clothes. Victoria blushed, bit her lip, stared at my neck and asked, What's that on your neck? I was bitten by Alexander last night. I glanced at Victoria and told her the truth. I slept with a man last night. Her face turned pale. I asked, Are you still painting? Victoria pursed her lips and threw me a black lace top. Put it on and sit on the sofa. I pulled at the black lace on my body. This is good. I'll go back and buy one for Alexander. Victoria, Harris, take a sip from the cup in front of you. I glanced at the anxious Victoria, stared at the water in front of me, chuckled and picked it up. As soon as I dozed off, someone brought me a pillow. You are so brave that you dare to drug me in Chen's house at this critical moment. Victoria is such a babe. The medicine is good and takes effect quickly. I pushed Victoria away, put on my clothes hastily, and rushed out of the studio, taking the painting on Victoria's drawing board with me as I left. Victoria's crying followed by the sound of something being smashed. Hall hurried downstairs. What happened? Where's Victoria? I bumped into him at the corner and yelled at me, Harris, you took Victoria? I raised my eyes and curled my lips towards Hall. The young lady is quite enthusiastic. I am timid and can't stand it. Hall looked at my expression and probably guessed what was going on, but the second half of the sentence got stuck in his throat, as if he had accidentally eaten shit. I buttoned my clothes and said, Hall, I don't feel well. I won't stay any longer. He glanced at Alexander, who was following him, and said, Professor, please give me a ride. I think I need to listen to some Buddhist scriptures now. I was almost hanging on Alexander and was carried out of the door by him. Alexander threw me in the car, unbuttoned 2 buttons, and got in the driver's seat. The car sped out. The speedometer reached 120, turning the SUV into a supercar. Fortunately, it is a private residence and there are no cars along the way. The heat in my body was rising higher and higher. I rummaged around on the passenger seat, ripping off my clothes and belt, and even trying to take off my pants. Alexander, I'm hot, please help me. The sharp sound of brakes pierced my head. Alexander unbuckled his seatbelt, pulled off his glasses, leaned over to me, grabbed my neck, and bit my lips and tongue. I was kissed so hard that I couldn't close my mouth for a long time. Alexander pulled back a little and pinched my face, veins popping out on his forehead. Harris, stop fucking breathing. I squinted at him. Seeing his hidden desires surging, he couldn't help himself. He laughed. Alexander, you were drugged too? Alexander took a deep breath, rubbed my lips restrainedly, let go of me and retreated. I'll take you to the hospital. This is a banned drug. The hospital can't handle it. I pulled him back by his collar and panted in his ear, Brother-in-law, come on me. Alexander was so angry that he took off his watch and said without thinking, Harris, you are 25 years old, not young anymore. He lowered the seat and touched my face. You don't stand a chance. By the end, I was left with nothing but lace hanging from my body. Alexander seems to particularly like that lace. Can't bear to tear it off, can't bear to take it off. He muttered something while kissing my lace. I grabbed his hair and asked, What are you mumbling about? Buddhist scriptures. Alexander said seriously, Don't you want to listen to it? I don't know when I fell asleep, but in my days I heard Alexander calling someone. Hall has 7 warehouses on Chumin Road in Dongqing District. The drugs are taken away with the goods every day. The quantity is enough to be sentenced. Clark, don't be so greedy. Harris didn't touch drugs. 1 haul is enough for you to get promoted. Don't touch Harris or I don't mind a fight to the death. Intuition tells me that these words are important and I should remember them, but my brain is no longer working on them. I struggled with a groan, trying to open my eyes, to look at Alexander's expression, to ask who he was talking to on the phone. In the dim car, Alexander's profile looked very cold. When he heard my voice, he changed his hand to hold the phone, freed his hand, rubbed my head, covered my eyes, and lowered his voice. Be good, go to sleep. I have always had an unstable sleep and would wake up at the slightest noise. When I woke up, it was still dark outside. I lay on Alexander's bed with my but feeling cold. Just as she was about to move, Alexander held her back. Don't move, your butt is rotten, be quiet. I was not convinced. My butt is not rotten. Alexander laughed and put the ointment on the bedside. Okay, it's not rotten, your butt is fine. She took 2 pieces of paper, wiped her smooth fingers, and looked at the watch. You've only slept for 3 hours. Be good, sleep a little longer. I thought for a while, pulled my pants over, took out a painting from my pocket, unfolded it and thrust it in Alexander's face. Brother-in-law, look, I think I have a 36D. Alexander. I put his hand on my chest muscle. If you don't believe me, feel it, it's really big. Alexander rubbed me, kissed me, and laughed softly. Go to sleep, 36D. I fell asleep contentedly. The 3rd time I woke up it was already noon, Alexander wasn't there and my phone was out of battery. I sat on the bed for a while, thinking about what happened since I entered Kingshanuan, but when I thought about the dashboard at 120 miles per hour the night before, my memory was cut off. In my mind, I felt that there was something very important that I had forgotten, and I felt a little uneasy. He lifted the quilt and saw my legs and couldn't help but curse. Is Alexander a beast? From the thighs to the ankles, there were pinching marks and bite marks, all blue and purple, very spectacular. I think I really turned Alexander gay. Just as I charged my phone, Moore called me. Harris, 2 kilograms of heroin were found in the flour bags in the hotel warehouse. Moore picked out the things in the morning and the police arrived in the afternoon. Hall wants to kill me. After sending the police away, I told Moore. Throw the stuff at the entrance of the hall and set it on fire. 11. The next day when I went to the club, I was stabbed at the door. It was Hall's man. I reacted quickly, blocked the attack, and knocked the man down. The wound wasn't deep, but it still hurt a little. When Alexander called, I was smashing the assailant's head against the wall. The screams made me upset, so I covered his mouth and said, "Shoo, don't shout." He took out his cell phone and answered the call. His breath was not steady. Hello. Alexander was silent for a moment and asked, What are you doing? You're panting so hard. I laughed and said, In the shop, getting my car fixed. Alexander, I'll pick you up from the store later. No thanks. My boss and I are going to another city for training. We will be away from SIPG for 2 months and will leave tonight. Hall and I have reached a point of life and death. I get stabbed in the stomach today, and a bullet in the head tomorrow. At this time, Alexander had better not have anything to do with me. Alexander was silent for a moment. Suddenly he said, Harris, you ran away after sleeping, are you kidding me? It's a big misunderstanding. I frowned and was about to reply when Moore hurriedly pushed the door open. I quickly hung up the phone and asked, What's going on? Harris, there's a woman outside looking for you. She said her name is Jessica. Does Alexander know that you are doing this? Jessica walked in uninvited, kicked the person who was knocked unconscious on the ground, and raised her eyebrows slightly. What I do is none of his business. She curled up on the sofa, picked up the cigarette box on the table, took out a cigarette, put it between her lips, and raised her eyes. I handed you over to Alexander, and he raised you to be like this? Leaving you in a place like this, risking your life. I hate it when Jessica criticizes him like this. Who are you to judge him? Jessica pointed at me with the hand holding the cigarette. Because I handed you over to him. Alexander promised me that he would protect you. Since he asked me for someone, he has to take responsibility, right? I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? What do you mean Alexander asked you for someone? Jessica was slightly startled and laughed with an ambiguous tone. I've been gone for 5 years and Alexander never mentioned it? He sneered, How patient you are. Whatever the reason, I am very dissatisfied with Alexander. I will divorce him, and you will leave C with me. I laughed so hard I wanted to die. How funny. Jessica, why are you pretending to be a good sister? Have you ever taken care of me? Where were you when I was almost beaten to death by that old beast? When I was 16 and went to your school to find you and begged you to take me away, what did you say? You said you couldn't take care of me, and you told me to just bear with it. You are not satisfied with Alexander? What are you dissatisfied with? 8 years ago, it was Alexander who took me away from that old bastard's house. You left Alexander without caring about anything and abandoned him. You have been gone for 5 years. Now that you are back, you are self-righteously dissatisfied with this and want to take that away. What gives you the right? He stopped laughing and looked at Jessica coldly. Alexander and I are living very well now. Can you please get out of here? Jessica looked at me for a while and pressed the cigarette butt into the ashtray. How are you doing? You are on the edge of a knife, while Alexander is using a broken Buddhist scripture to get something for nothing. He is manipulating both the black and white worlds. You are a good university professor, but you have become an intelligence dealer. There are more people in SIPG who want to kill you too than the stars in the sky. You tell me this is good? I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean, Alexander? An information dealer. Jessica was stunned for a moment, grabbed my collar, and said through gritted teeth, Harris, you idiot. Alexander is hiding something from me. Before I attacked Hall, I told Moore, find out when Alexander started preaching. Find out who the people were who sought him out. Also, find out how Hall found him. Hall's birthday party was held on the top floor of Hongqing Hotel in Dongqing District. I took a gun and went to celebrate Hall's birthday. Before pulling out the gun, he wished Hall a long life. Unfortunately, the shot was not accurate. The people around him pushed Hall and the bullet hit Hall's shoulder. Security personnel rushed in quickly, sirens sounded from downstairs, and the crowd in the venue scattered, screaming and crying. I took advantage of the chaos and ran into the emergency passage, but was chased for 3 floors. At a corner, I was pulled into a storage room, and then I felt a pain in the back of my neck and lost consciousness. When I woke up, everything was dark. There was a damp and moldy smell around, like a basement. I was tied to a chair, blindfolded and gagged. In the dark, time is hard to keep track of. After a long time, I heard footsteps, coming from far away, neither fast nor slow. Finally, he stood in front of me and removed the cloth that was stuffing my mouth. The wet spoon pressed against my lips. I leaned back to avoid the spoon. What's that dirty stuff? Don't eat random things from outside. The spoon was pulled away, and then a hand pinched my face, forcing me to open my mouth and pour sugar water into it. The sugar water, which I didn't have time to swallow, flowed down my neck and I choked and coughed. The neck was grabbed and the corners of my lips felt slippery and wet. My mind went blank. What was that? The slightly itchy sensation spread down along the traces left by the sugar water. Who? I gritted my teeth and struggled in vain. Get out of here. Warm, dry hands clasped my face, lips touching teeth. I bit his tongue hard and was dislocated. The hand slid down my neck and I got goosebumps. There were voices coming from upstairs. The man listened quietly for a while, took his hand away, straightened my clothes, fixed my chin, patted my face gently, and left. There was no one left in the basement, so I continued playing with the rope. If you want to get involved in gangsterism, you always have to hide some cards on you. The rope was quickly untied. I pulled down the cloth covering my eyes, looked around, found a handy iron rod, and carried it out of the basement. The house is very big and there is a garden just around the corner from the stairs. The sunlight was glaring and the flowers were in full bloom. There were 2 people standing among the flowers, both of whom I knew. One is Alexander, and the other is Clark, director of the Shanghai Port Public Security Department. Clark caught sight of me first and instantly became alert, quickly drawing his gun and pointing it at me. Alexander glanced at me and slowly put the gun to Clark's head. Clark, you know, my brother-in-law is a good citizen. The situation was at a stalemate, and Clark said, he was the suspect in the shooting at the Hongqing Hotel last night. Really? You got the wrong person. Harris was with me yesterday. Clark couldn't stand it any longer. Alexander, the hotel has surveillance cameras. Maybe not? Did you get the surveillance? Alexander pressed Clark's gun down. Forget it, Clark. Don't waste your time. I guarantee that even if you catch Harris, he will be released without charge. Clark took Alexander's gun and strode away. You're on your own. Alexander laughed and said, Sir, you're not going to take toy guns, are you? The car stopped by the sea. Alexander opened the window and the sea breeze blew in. What do you want to ask? When did you know that? I knew it from the beginning. Is it fun to watch me play the role of a mechanic here? That's quite interesting. I laughed angrily. What's going on between you and Clark? It's just cooperation. Alexander tapped the steering wheel with his fingers. Clark wants to catch Hall and eliminate the gang forces in Shanghai port. If he succeeds, it will be a great achievement. As for me, I want Hall dead. I raised my eyebrows. Do you have a grudge against Hall? Harris, when you were 17, you swore to me that you would not get hurt or put your life in jeopardy. Alexander tilted his head to look at me. Why didn't you do that? Because Hall pinned me to the ground, stepped on my face and said, Harris, it's not that I won't let you go. You've been stained with blood. Where are you going to go after leaving the underworld? Will the police let you go? Will your enemies let you go? The muzzle of the gun was against my head. People in our line of work can only go once. If you want to go, I'll give you a ride. Alexander said, because you can't get away, Hall won't let you go, and neither will the police. You didn't tell me all this. But if you don't tell me, can't I see it? Do you think that if you take a shower, change clothes, and roll around in the motor oil before coming back, I won't be able to smell your blood? Do you know how I felt when I saw you getting up in the middle of the night and treating your wounds alone? I feel so fucking incompetent. Alexander's eyes were red. When you were 15, I couldn't save you. When you were 17, I still couldn't save you. I thought you wouldn't get hurt if I took you to my side. But even when I was watching you, you were still bleeding and licking your wounds where I couldn't see. I met Alexander when I was 15 years old. After being beaten by my father, I ran into Alexander's family's pharmacy. The first thing I said to Alexander was, I think I'm dying, can you give me some medicine? Alexander lifted my clothes, and there was a softness that I couldn't understand, and asked, does it hurt? Until I was 15, I believed that pain was right. But Alexander said that was wrong, I shouldn't have to endure this. He stood in front of the old beast and threatened to call the police. He said he could help me. Actually no. Adults are cunning, I always have to go home. No one at home could see, the old beast raised his fists and feet, like a madman. You're threatening to call the police. No one can stop me from educating my son. The injuries became more severe each time, and Alexander's eyes became sadder each time. His tears dripped on my scars, making them hot. Said, Harris, run. I looked at him blankly and asked, where am I going? When I was 8 years old, my mother couldn't stand the domestic violence anymore, so she ran away with Jessica and left me with that beast. 3 people were beaten, but now I am the only one being beaten. Alexander told me to run, so I went to find Jessica. I always knew where she was. Knowing that she is my sister and knowing that I have a mother, I begged Jessica to take me with her too. I don't want to get hurt again because Alexander would be upset if he saw it. Jessica said she couldn't do it. Harris, I can't save you. You either endure it or beat him to death. You're still young, so it's okay to beat him to death. Since I couldn't escape, I never went back to look for Alexander. He is so gentle. I didn't feel any pain at first, but as soon as he applied the medicine on me, I felt pain. If he cries, it will hurt me even more. The day I beat my father to a pulp with a steel rod, I went to see Alexander. Unfortunately, he was not there. The auntie in the store said he went to school. I don't know what Alexander's school is like, and whether he gets beaten up like me. Alexander said the pain was wrong. So I fought back, grabbing the guy who kicked me and smashing his head on the ground. So, I couldn't even stay in school. When I met Hall and picked up the knife, I suddenly realized that I was born an evil person. He was not afraid of pain, did not care about his life, was ruthless and had no mercy, and soon became famous on the streets. At the age of 17, Alexander and Jessica got married. On the wedding night, Alexander took me away and said, Harris, come with me. I will support you from now on. Alexander arrived too late and I no longer needed him to support me, but I still held his hand. 15. I looked at Alexander and suddenly understood something. At the age of 15, I walked up to Alexander, feeling miserable. So my suffering became a trap for Alexander. He wanted to save me. He took it as his responsibility to save me. His redemption is high above. Gentle enough, warm enough, and tolerant enough. This kind of redemption involves great compromise of all love and hate, and tolerance of my willful behavior. I couldn't see through him and treated him as a mortal, thinking I could satisfy his selfish desires. I reached out and touched Alexander's face. Alexander, whether I get hurt or die is none of your business. Don't be my savior. He pulled his hand away, opened the door and prepared to get out. I can kill Hall myself. I will keep climbing up with my head held high. I don't need your help. Please don't get in my way. Alexander grabbed me, his eyes red with anger. Harris, who do you think you are? How many lives do you have left for a brainless desperado like you? You don't need my help? You were out there killing people and setting fires, and I was cleaning up your mess for 10 years. Hall has been to the police station several times, but you never went to jail. Do you really think you're lucky? I shook off his hand, punched him, and pinned him down on the seat. Do I need to kneel down and kowtow to you, thanking you for saving my life? What the hell does it have to do with you whether I live or die? Alexander, I don't need you to save me. Even if I'm chopped into pieces and thrown into the sea to feed the fish, it's what I deserve. Please have some mercy, pay Bodhisattva. 16. The situation at SIPG changes every day. Nathan's drug trafficking was busted by the police, and he fled at night but was shot dead at the port. Hall was taken to the police station and died of an illness in the police station. After Hall's death, Shanghai SIPG fell into chaos. In order to fight for power, the underworld fell into chaos, fighting for territory and constant gunfights. The police took advantage of the chaos to clear out the gang forces. Wherever there were gunshots, there were sirens. And at the critical moment of the struggle for power, I learned that Alexander was captured by his enemies and his life was in danger. I searched all 137 cargo ships in the harbor, but couldn't find Alexander. Harris. I heard a familiar voice behind me and turned around suddenly. When I saw Alexander, a handkerchief was covering my mouth and nose. Shit, I got cheated. 17. When I woke up, I heard a long flute. Rushing out of the cabin, sinking into the darkness, and falling into the sea. The ship was far away from the shore, and the port seemed to be buried by the sea and disappeared without a trace. Hey, you're awake? I turned my head and saw Jessica leaning on the railing. I asked, Where's Alexander? I'm still cleaning up your mess at the port. Have a finger in the pie. I want to go back. Jessica, then jump into the sea. Jessica took a sip of wine and suddenly asked, Harris, did you sleep with Alexander? None of your business. Jessica tilted her head and asked, Do you like Alexander? None of your business. Answer the question and I'll tell you a secret about Alexander. I glanced at her and said, I like it. Alexander and I are old classmates. When you were 16, Alexander came to me and asked me to save you and take you away. Jessica laughed and said, And given my situation at the time, I could only take you with me to die. So, I sold you to Alexander. Through marriage, I gave him a legitimate guardianship. Actually, I hate the way Alexander looks at you, the way he wants to keep you to himself, the possessiveness buried deep in his bones. But I have no choice. At least if you follow Alexander, you won't be beaten to death. I asked Alexander to be my brother-in-law. I lied to him and said you had psychological trauma and hated homosexuals. Jessica said with inexplicable malice, Before I left Shanghai port, I warned Alexander to keep his feelings to himself, otherwise I would come back and take you away. Actually, I know why Alexander doesn't want to divorce me. In Alexander's mind, the marriage certificate doesn't prove the legal relationship between him and me, but between him and you. He thinks that as long as this bond exists, he can hold on to you forever. He's really sick. But I still divorced Alexander before I left. I know you care about this. I sneered. What do you want to say? Alexander likes me? How do you know he doesn't do it out of pity for me? Jessica was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. No, Harris, you don't really think that you drugged Alexander, kissed and touched him every night, and he didn't know it all, did you? That's what I thought, thank you. I narrowed my eyes. How do you know? I saw it. Jessica chuckled. You forgot, I also have the key to Alexander's house. Sighing, that was too exciting. Next time, remember to carry her to the bed. On the sofa, that was too indecent. Did you deliberately call Alexander that night? Jessica shrugged and said, I tried to wake him up. As expected, he didn't wake up. He's really good at pretending. I gritted my teeth. How do you know he is pretending? Jessica said meaningfully, go ask Alexander if he drank the drugs every time you gave him one. The boat drifted for 10 days and docked in a small town. The day after I arrived in town, Alexander also arrived. He drove for 2 days and was exhausted. When he arrived, he fell on top of me and onto the bed. I struggled for a bit, and Alexander held my arms tightly. Don't move, I'll hold you for a while. I looked at the low ceiling and said, Alexander, Jessica said you like me. He buried his head in the crook of my neck and breathed heavily. Well, what else did you say? You said I drugged you, but you know everything. No. I gritted my teeth and said, Are you awake? Alexander's voice was tired, with a hint of a smile. I wasn't awake all the time. I was awake for the first few times, but then I realized I couldn't hold it anymore. I always wanted to respond to you, and sooner or later I would be exposed. I was afraid that if I was exposed I would scare you away, so I drank it all. Occasionally I would vomit when I thought about it, and I would stay awake to enjoy it. This old guy is better at playing than me. If you like me, why don't you say it? Because you are too young. You were only 18 when you drugged me. You were still in puberty. I was afraid that you were just curious, that you just wanted to play a trick on me, that you just wanted something new and didn't love me. Jessica said that you hate homosexuals, but I didn't really believe it. But even if there is a possibility that you hate homosexuals, I can't easily show my cards. Harris, I can endure this for the rest of my life, but I can't scare you away. I continued to ask, the last time I kidnapped you, did you know it was me? I know. You and I used the same shower gel, and you smell like me all over. No need to ask, it was also him who broke my jaw in the basement. I made the same exclamation as Jessica. Alexander, you are really good at pretending. I found Jessica and I's wedding rings in your bedroom at Shungha Bay. Alexander groped and took my hand. If you want it, why don't you tell me? The ring, which was warm from being squeezed, was put into my ring finger. Alexander's fingers passed through mine and intertwined ours. The silver rings on the ring fingers collided with each other, boiling silently and deafeningly. Happy wedding, Harris.